WWE Evil was a documentary series produced by Peacock. It featured 8 episodes focused on wrestling heels. You had John Cena narrating the entire series. And watching it for the first time, I understand why they didn't do more of these. This was basically just season 1. It was supposed to be multiple seasons. They didn't do any more because it's just so generic. It's nothing that you've never heard before. In fact, it's things that you've already know. And I think this was initially targeted towards people who were first getting Peacock. When WWE first joined Peacock, they wanted these new fans to learn more about these heels so they can get into the WWE product. Maybe they'll watch these well-produced documentary series and become WWE fans. To me, watching it, I don't have access to Peacock because I live in Canada, but watching it, I don't see how this would really bring in new fans, and it just felt like so generic. I don't know. It was nothing riveting about it. It felt just whatever. It's things you've heard a million times, and I don't think it's something that really would draw new fans in, and that's why they didn't renew the series after one season. But John Cena, I would say, I'd like to say, he did a really good job narrating all 8 episodes. But episode 1 was Hollywood Hulk Hogan. Yeah, they just recap his career, and do I really need to recap Hulk Hogan's career for you? I mean, there was just a Netflix documentary, Hulk Hogan, Real American, that did a better job of that. I mean, we all know everything about Hulk Hogan's career. So he goes to WCW. Bischoff gets Hogan to turn heel. Nash tells a story of how Hogan wasn't sure until 4 o'clock that day to turn heel at Bash at the Beach in '96. And it's the greatest heel turn of all time. We all know that. He turns on Randy Savage, aligns with the Outsiders, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. Later, they formed a New World Order, the NWO. Bobby Heenan had the classic line, "Whose side is he on?" Still the best heel turn ever. Gotta love Bobby Heenan, but I know. He changes colors from red and yellow to the black and white. He had several appearances by celebrities on this as well. And then you had the rise of the NWO, WCW winning the ratings for 83 weeks. Eric Bischoff has a podcast named 83 Weeks because that's all he really could live on. Because after that, he lost. He went out of business. WCW went out of business. He failed at TNA. So Bischoff can still live with the 83 weeks. He could still live off that. But, look, Hogan and Bischoff, without Hogan, WCW would have never beaten WWF. But at the same time, both of them are responsible for, that doesn't work for me, brother. Bischoff allowing Hogan to do whatever he wanted, giving him like full creative control, and Hogan being selfish, not putting over Sting. Like both of them deserve a lot of blame for WCW going under. But when that doesn't work for me, brother, I mean Hogan. We can go through everything with the backstage politics. We all know that, but they get into Vince Russo here, and I think, by the way, that doesn't work for me, brother. I think that line was first said by Kevin Nash in a shoot interview. Nash loves Hogan. Like, him and Hogan were very close, and I noticed that when Nash talked about Hogan after he passed away, but I think that's when that first line became popularized, and like on internet, wrestling, people always mention that. But Bischoff is eventually out of WCW in late '99 to bring in Vince Russo, and he was featured in this documentary. Bischoff hates Russo because of that, and the thing with Russo, he had so many terrible ideas. The Judy Bagwell on the pole, shit like that, all these stupid ideas. But also, he wanted to feature younger talent. It's just that he didn't have the same younger talent roster that he had at WWF. And I think the big mistake Vince Russo made was thinking he was a genius, when in reality he got lucky because he had Stone Cold Steve Austin on his roster. Austin got over, he got red hot. It's it's a situation where it's just lightning in a bottle. It's organic, and later Rock would get over. He would get super over, and he would become a huge star. And there was no one in WCW to compete with Austin and Rock. What are they really going to do? So I think that's why they lost in the end. The other company had two major stars and couldn't compete. So anyway. Now we get to Bash at the Beach 2000, and there's a Dark Side of the Ring produced on this episode that's great that you should watch if you want to know more about it on this topic. But here's the thing. Hogan is lying. Yes, I know. Hulk Hogan lies. Oh my God. And this thing was made in this was released in 2022, so obviously he's alive at this time. He would pass away 3 years later, but he's lying about the Jarrett situation. Like, the whole stuff with Jarrett, Hogan knew Jarrett was going to lay down on his back, and Hogan's going to pin him. Russo went off script after Hogan and Bischoff left the arena. That's what happened. But, basically, remember that in classic Hulk Hogan tweet? You worked yourself into a shoot, brother? Well, that's what happened here. Vince Russo literally worked himself into a shoot, brother. That's what happened. And it was a work until Russo goes off script. Don't believe what Hogan is saying here. And then they go into WCW going under, and they talk about Rock and Hogan at WrestleMania 18. The classic match, one of my favorite matches ever. He turns face, he turns back to the red and yellow, and I love how the episode ended with the classic way the NWO's segments would always end after their video segments. The preceding announcement has been paid for by the New World Order. Perfect way to end it. NWO still looks the greatest heel faction, most successful heel faction we've seen. Come on, NWO was great. I mean, them and the Four Horsemen, definitely the greatest factions. And Hogan's heel run, Hollywood Hogan, one of the greatest heel characters of all time. We all know this, and again, this was fine for what it was, but it's nothing you've never seen before. I just didn't like the stuff, how they just lied about the stuff. And lying and Hulk Hogan goes with the territory, seriously. I shouldn't be too surprised. Anyway, episode 2 is on The Miz. I found this the least appealing going in. I really didn't care. I mean, I've heard this stuff with Miz a million times. And mainly because I just watched that 24 episode on The Miz for the first time. And that was really good. That was way better than this. Maurice was interviewed for this as well. They talk about the Real World show on MTV. Don't really care because I just watched it on that 24 episode, which was way better. John Cena narrated and mentioned how the locker room hated The Miz. We all know that. They talk about him getting kicked out of the locker room. Again, I've seen this a million times, heard this a million times. He's talked about this in shoot interviews a million times. If you want to know who kicked The Miz out of the locker room, he appeared on Talk Is Jericho, Chris Jericho's podcast, years ago. But Jericho asked who it was, and Miz said it didn't matter. And then Jericho asked, was it Benoit? Miz said, yeah. So Chris Benoit was the one who kicked The Miz out of the locker room. Just in case you were ever curious about who it was, Benoit was the one who did it. And they grilled Miz for eating chicken in the locker room. If I were to guess, it probably would have been Chris Benoit and Bob Holly, probably the two ones who kicked him out. I don't know if it was Eddie. Eddie and Chris were really close, but I think it was it was probably Benoit, and the other guy is probably Bob Holly, the two guys who drove him out of the locker room and kicked him out. But they mentioned the dirt sheet. That was a lot of fun to watch back in the day. And a lot of this is just recycled stuff from the 24 documentary. It's really lazy. It's like there were episodes where I think they tried. Other episodes, I felt like they just put a whole bunch of clips together. We see the angry Miz girl after he wins the championship from Randy Orton to cash in. She won the Slammy, by the way. They talk about him impersonating The Rock on that Raw episode. This stuff in 2011. This was released in 2022. It was man, everyone, his whole career highlights. It's crazy with The Miz. He has 5 or 6 career highlights in a 20-year career. It's really remarkable how he's been able to stick around. It's he does nothing and he has a good run, but there's years of inactivity. It's a fascinating career. It really is, because it's really incredible how he got away with just being nothing for so long. Just having a few good months out of his whole career is there's probably 9 or 10 good months out of 20 years. Anyway, the terrible WrestleMania 27 main event is mentioned, and Talking Smack in 2016. Still his best promo of his career, and that wasn't really supposed to be one, but it turned real with Daniel Bryan, and it was great. He gave it to Bryan good, because Bryan's telling him, you're soft, the way you wrestle. It's hypocritical in a way, because Daniel Bryan had to wrestle from his style, so it's you're calling him, you don't like the way he wrestles. I mean, you had to retire for a while because of the way you wrestle, but again, I said with Miz, he has had 5 career highlights in 20 years. So it is what it is. This was this of all the ones, this was the one I was least interested in, was exactly what I expected. So we go to episode 3 for WWE Evil, and that was on The Boss, Sasha Banks, and she was still with the company. So March of 2022, this was released. She walked out 2 months later. Less than 2 months later, in May of 2022. Her and Naomi had that dispute. She's doing great. She's doing great in AEW as Mercedes Moné. She's making a lot of money. She's making more money reportedly than any other woman in wrestling. So she did a great career move in hindsight, but I don't know how many people watch AEW or keep up with it. Just WWE's a much bigger platform, but she made her decision, and the walkout happened after this. She talked about growing up, and I've heard Sasha Banks talk about this in numerous interviews. She loved wrestling. She didn't have much in her life, and it's kind of sad hearing her talk about it because it didn't seem like she was too sociable, and she just had wrestling, and it was her escape, and it made her love it. And she loved Eddie Guerrero. She first gets in WWE later in 2012 was when they first signed her. And then she develops a boss character in NXT. Sasha, there was the funny Sasha is Ratchet chants from the old Full Sail crowds, which I loved. They talk about the rivalry with Charlotte. There's real heat there. They were really good friends at first, and Charlotte's talked about that. I think she talked about Sasha in her book about this. Sasha and her were really close, but then when Charlotte was the one who was getting the push, Sasha began to resent Charlotte over it. And she saw it as, she's only getting this push because of her father, Ric Flair. And it ended their friendship. And Charlotte was upset about that. It really hurt her because her and Sasha were really close. But very competitive. The Four Horsewomen were featured. Charlotte and Bayley were featured a lot more in this than Becky was. They didn't show Becky much. But then Sasha didn't interact with Becky as much as the other two. And of course, they talk about the great match she had with Bayley, NXT TakeOver Brooklyn. Still the greatest women's match I think WWE has had. I love that match. Classic match. Then they show Izzy. She appeared in the documentary, especially when they talk about the next Bayley match at the TakeOver Respect show, which was the Iron Woman match, which Bayley won. She goes to the main roster. Doesn't really have the success people thought she would. She lost to Charlotte a million times in 2016. That killed her. 2017 was like a dead year for Sasha Banks. I remember it. And then 2018 was this ultimate nothing year for her. Like, she was done. And then 2019, she won the women's tag belts with Bayley at the Elimination Chamber. Then they lost the next month at WrestleMania to the Iconics. Horrible fucking Vince McMahon booking decision, one of his worst with the woman. He had this infatuation with the Iconics. They were fucking atrocious, both of them. And then they both got released a couple years after that. They were a massive flop. And, Sasha got upset and she left. And, she leaves in 2019. I think the whole situation with her was always... I don't think it was more so I'm sure she was upset. I'm sure there was things in her life that were hurting and she was burnt out. I think the thing was, had more to do creative. I think Sasha Mercedes is someone who's very competitive, and she is so good in the ring that she believes she needs to be at the top of the division, and she's never going to settle for just being an upper mid card, which I think is what WWE saw her as. I don't think they ever saw Sasha Banks as the female star. I think they saw her as an upper mid card star. They didn't view her the same way they viewed Charlotte Flair, the way they would later view Becky Lynch or Bianca Belair or Rhea Ripley. They didn't view her like that. But Sasha was never going to be okay with it. I think the real reason was she saw the way Charlotte and Becky were, and she realized she wasn't going to get there. So I think she just couldn't accept it. And she was upset with it, and she saw herself at a different level than the company did, and that's why she left. So, she couldn't she wanted to be a top star, and she asked Vince for a release in 2019. I didn't know that. I thought I didn't know she actually asked him for her release, but he said no. And you can tell she's ready to leave. Like, you can tell that there was stuff with the company and her, like, she wanted to go. And looking back, it's not surprising that she wasn't happy there, that we found that out when she left in 2022 again, the second time she walked out. And her only return with the company is going to be 2019. I'll say it right now. So they talk about her main eventing WrestleMania 37 Night 1. That was featured against Bianca Belair, and she lost. And I'll just say this with Sasha Banks. Her big triumphant return to WWE, her big comeback will be when she turned on Natalya in 2019 in that summer. I covered on LRMania when I was reviewing at that time. I was surprised to see her back. That's it for her. Like, you're not going to see a big triumphant Sasha Banks return. If I'm wrong, I'll eat my words and I'll say it publicly. But I think that's it. I don't think she's coming back to wrestling, to WWE, of course. She's in wrestling. She's doing really well in AEW. I think it's really personal with her with the company that they didn't view her as one of the top female stars, and she's very a hard worker and very competitive. And I think I don't think she'll be back. I think she's the one who's not coming back. She might make an appearance later down the road in that regard, yes, but as a full-time star, Sasha Banks, I think she's done in WWE. I think she's Mercedes Moné permanently now, and Sasha Banks is not coming back to WWE. Episode 4 was on the Brothers of Destruction, and of course, Undertaker and Kane were interviewed. Bruce Pritchard was the one who pitched Vince the Undertaker, and Undertaker said, he was basically referring to Ole Anderson. He didn't say him by name, but he's the one who told Undertaker nobody would pay to see him wrestle. He didn't mention his name, but Ole thought about that with a lot of guys. Look, when Ole Anderson sees Mean Mark, no one's going to pay to see Mean Mark to wrestle. So, like, he didn't know the Undertaker was going to get... Mean Mark would get, like, the greatest gimmick in the history of wrestling with the Undertaker, the greatest character of all time. And Taker said that he took inspiration from the Undertaker character from Jason Voorhees from Friday the 13th, Michael Myers from Halloween, and Freddy Krueger from A Nightmare on Elm Street. You can see different elements of all three of those great classic horror icons into the Undertaker. Those are like the big three if you like horror films. But with Jason, you can see it. Undertaker's indestructible. You can't kill him. Like, you can never destroy Jason. He's relentless. And then Michael Myers with his movements. You know, the setup is directly from Michael Myers in the original Halloween when he sets up behind Laurie Strode. Undertaker got that from Michael Myers, and the mannerisms, the way he moves his head, a lot of that. And Freddy Krueger was like the voice, and the eye rolling is from Freddy. So you can see different elements from all three of them with the Undertaker character, and also with Kane. But we'll talk about that later when we talk about him. But with Undertaker, yeah, definitely very much a horror movie inspired character. And there's a huge overlap with horror fans and wrestling fans, if you don't know. But people were afraid of the Undertaker in the early 90s. Like, when he would come out to like the Sympathy, the Graveyard Sympathy song, there were kids crying in the front row. And then they had Paul Bearer, which was essential to the gimmick getting over. Him, one of the greatest pairings of all time. Undertaker and Paul Bearer. The only thing that I can think of I would put ahead of him would be Brock Lesnar and Paul Heyman, maybe. But Undertaker and Paul Bearer are right up there. It was a great, manager and wrestler pairing. Then they get to Kane. They actually showed the old storyboards. They first showed it with Undertaker, the storyboards, but then later they showed it with Kane. And at first, he didn't have a mask. He basically was like the Undertaker in red. He looked exactly like the Undertaker to storyboards, but he would like wear all red, and compared to Undertaker's black. And I'm glad that we actually got to see those storyboards and they saved them. But then, Kane would later get the mask. And Bruce Pritchard is the one who he pitched the name Kane. Comes from the Bible, Cain and Abel, the sibling rivalry. So it makes sense for him to be Kane. And Undertaker's name originally, when he first came in, early on, they were calling him Kane the Undertaker. Look up the clips. But they didn't mention this here. And it's like the beginning of an 80s slasher movie that's like Kane's burning. Because if you ever watch those old slasher movies, there's a horrible event that happens at first, and like later, the killer comes back. That's how it always goes. And it's like Kane's burning. It's like him coming back. If anything, I've always thought it's kind of like Jason in Friday the 13th when he drowns and he comes back. But Kane, he kind of gets burned. I guess he's similar to Freddy in a way. He gets burned. But I thought Kane's more like Jason, where it's like there's almost this innocence about him. If you watch those, if you understand the Friday the 13th movies, there's like this innocence about him because he was a kid who was drowned, whereas Undertaker is more like Michael Myers, or like he's just pure evil. Like his character is like, no, it's like there's no sympathy at all. It's like, but anyway, they have the Bad Blood debut at Hell in a Cell. I still think the greatest debut ever. Kane's debut against, and that whole presentation of that match, the Hell in a Cell at Bad Blood, Undertaker and Shawn Michaels, it's excellent. It's classic stuff. And Kane is a monster when he debuts. He murders everybody. Like, he kills everyone. He destroys guys. He destroyed Mankind, destroyed Vader. And Jason Blum of Blumhouse was on this. He was featured on this, and it's very horror movie inspired at first with Kane. Jim Cornette's talked about that when he was in creative, pitching Kane, and Paul Bearer is just tremendous. You look back at his promos, the stuff he's saying about Undertaker. Paul Bearer was essential for this thing getting over. It does not work without Paul Bearer. He was great. I like the version of Paul Bearer at first with Undertaker where he has like the black hair, everything's like sinister look and dark. With Kane, it's like he has more of his natural hair color to look more like a dad who's like who's upset and is hurt. And I think he was just fantastic here. They have a great match, WrestleMania 14. Love the match. Kane's the first guy to kick out of the Tombstone Piledriver. And they actually showed the casket burning too at the Royal Rumble before the WrestleMania match. It was fun looking back at something you loved as a kid. I loved the Undertaker-Kane rivalry as a kid. I wasn't watching wrestling in '98. I was too young. But I would go back and get the tapes, and I'd like watch various Raw highlights on the Undertaker-Kane rivalry and then recap. And I'd watch those two matches, the WrestleMania match and then the Inferno match at the Unforgiven show. It's just so much fun looking back at something like you just loved as a kid. I was a huge fan of it. One of the best feuds in WWE history. I loved everything about that feud. Huge fan of it. And then after the Inferno match later that year, Brothers of Destruction are formed. And it's not historically accurate. They make it as if they were a great tag team for all these years. 99% of their careers they were kept separate. To be honest, maybe like 98 to be honest. But yeah, Brothers of Destruction is something they would do on occasion. Then. They mentioned The Undertaker becoming the American Badass and Kane unmasking. Again, nothing you've never seen before. They didn't mention the second rivalry in 2004 when Undertaker returned. And then the third rivalry in 2010, which was awful, which I'm glad they didn't mention that. They shouldn't have. But still, yeah, it's Undertaker and Kane. It's nothing you've never seen before. But it's just fun. It's fun looking back at it. It's cool looking back at stuff you liked a lot as a kid. And I for what this was, these first 4 episodes I thought were pretty good. And now we'll see what's next for it. And now getting to episode 5, this one was about Randy Orton. And the first thing I noticed, I could not get over this, was looking at Randy's appearance on this documentary, which was released in 2022, now looking at his appearance, comparing the two, it's insane how much smaller he was only a few years ago. He's massive now. In 2022 is when he had that really bad back injury, he had surgery, and he was gone for like a year and a half. He came back at Survivor Series in 2023, ironically the same show where CM Punk returned, and he was massive at that time, and he still is now. He basically had the physique of Brock Lesnar because he gained a lot of weight and he just put on muscle to kind of replace the weight gain. So he kept the weight, it just turned from fat to muscle, and he's massive now. It's funny looking at how much smaller he was. I forgot. And they mentioned the RKO meme. That was part of it. That went viral. I remember that. And it's weird because it didn't feel like he ever became a bigger star on TV. It's just that meme went viral. And Cowboy Bob Orton, his father, was interviewed. They show Randy going to OVW. He was part of the Best Class Ever, alongside John Cena, Brock Lesnar, and Dave Bautista. Then he debuts on the main roster against Hardcore Holly, I believe. And then he gets into Evolution. That's what sets him up. Triple H putting him in Evolution alongside with Batista and Ric Flair being there. And, Flair's the past, Triple H is the present, Randy Orton and Batista are the future. Evolution, and they were a modern-day 4 horsemen, very successful. And then he had that really great rivalry with Mick Foley, and it culminated at Backlash in 2004 when he took those bumps. And I think, they mentioned this in that documentary, that he gained a lot of respect from fans because they just viewed him as like this pretty boy who's a second or a third generation star. He was handpicked, but when he started taking those bumps, and especially when he got the thumbtacks in the palm of his hand, which was just gross to watch, I think he gained a lot of respect from the fans. And then he becomes the Legend Killer. And as they recap his career, they also show all his problems. And one of the things they talked about was he was actually drunk when he inducted his father into the Hall of Fame. He mentioned that. I've never heard that before. Maybe I should have. I don't know if this was a big story on the internet, but he was intoxicated. You can see it. He's visibly intoxicated when he inducts his own father into the Hall of Fame in 2005. That would be the night before WrestleMania 21 in Los Angeles. It's like, wow, he actually was. And he talked about almost overdosing. He almost died. And he went to the hospital. He was almost fired for his substance abuses. And one thing that they didn't mention, I just always thought about this looking back at, finding out the kind of person he was. They crowned him the youngest world heavyweight champion at SummerSlam in 2004 when he won the World Heavyweight Championship. And he's the youngest champion ever. And then they take it away from him the next month. And it was kind of like a burial. Triple H just beat him for the belt and was like decisive. And I was thinking, why? Like, they just crowned him. Why are they taking the belt away from him so soon? Looking back, it was probably due to his substance issues. It was due to his personality, and he got a lot of heat backstage, and, he was a young punk. He was a dick, and people didn't like him, and there was just a lot of issues, and that's probably why they took the belt off him. But they really talked a lot about his issues, and the fact that he almost died, it's like, that was eye-opening to me. And then they talk more about his career. They mentioned the Fiend feud, the Fiend Bray Wyatt's character. He burned him. I remember that at TLC 2020. And he had that horrible feud with Alexa Bliss. And then she actually beat him on the PLE. And then they literally just fucking destroyed the Fiend. I mean, first he buried the Fiend. Then he burned the Fiend first. I apologize. Then he buried the Fiend at WrestleMania 37. Oh, that was awful. The stuff with Alexa turning on the Fiend. She has like that black liquid falling down her face. Like, what the fuck? That was horrible. And that Bray never recovered from that. And they released him, and they probably never going to cut Bray. That's why they had him get squashed. That was awful. And that was terrible. But going back to Randy here, he really opened up here, and I thought when this was over, I wrote this down in my notes. That was my favorite episode of the WWE Evil documentary series episodes. Like, that was my favorite one so far. I really liked it. Randy really opened up. He talked about his issues. He was honest. I thought he came off really well. And I really liked how they reminisced early on in his career, because to me, looking back at that version of Randy Orton, I was a big fan of him. And, he had that song, Ref Deary song, Hey, that song was that fast-paced song, so much different from the Voices song. It feels like a completely different individual, and it's fascinating looking back at it, because that Randy Orton, it's like he doesn't even exist, because this Orton is just totally different from him, and that young punk, arrogant Randy Orton. I remember watching him, and I liked that Randy Orton. I was a fan. I was probably a bigger fan of him then than I am now, to be honest. I really liked him, but looking back, I remember all this stuff, but it feels like he's just it's almost like it didn't happen. It's just a totally different person, a totally different character, totally different performer. It feels so foreign looking back at that Randy Orton, that early one. So it's really hard to believe it's the same guy. It feels like it's two different people. But I really like this episode 5. Now, going on to episode 6, this one was on Stephanie McMahon, and I'll just say it right now. I thought her character in the 2010s was terrible. She always demasculated the male performers, and she never got her receipt ever. She was awful at that, and she was really the most protected character on Raw at that time. I remember one time she just completely destroys John Cena on the mic. I'm thinking, why? He's the top star in the company still this time. Why have this chick that will just embarrass him and humiliate him on the mic when she's never going to get her comeuppance? What does it achieve? It makes her look strong, but why? She doesn't draw money. Why have her bury him? And then she did it to so many other guys. She did it to Roman Reigns once. I remember that. There was other ones where she would just bury wrestlers, and it pissed me off. And I thought, like, for what? No one ever gives her receipt. And I hated that character. I hated that Stephanie McMahon character in the 2010s. I hated the authority. Like, it wasn't a good heat. It was go away heat. Oh, I hated them. Anyway, She really was the most protected character on all of Raw. The demasculation of all these male stars, it pissed me off. But I had to mention that. But then they talk about early Stephanie McMahon. They talk about the Undertaker storyline when he abducts her, then the higher power, which was Vince all along. That was such bullshit, by the way. And it's ironic looking back because the speculation on the internet was at the time that was going to be like this big surprise, and they're going to introduce someone new, a new character, someone from WCW maybe, and it turns out to be Vince. Now they get to the Test marriage storyline, which was really good. I thought her and Test had really good chemistry looking back at some of those Raw segments they had together, and I thought, no, this was good. And then they had the infamous Triple H reveal. And by the way, that killed Test's career because he had a good match with Shane at SummerSlam that year, and it was set up for him to marry Stephanie. And then they had Triple H kidnap Stephanie, drug her. And it was so great. That segment is great. It's really cartoonish. It's funny. It's like makes Triple H look like a comic book villain. But the fact that he abducted Stephanie and married her, and talking her voice like to get the confirmation. It's like it's so wacky because it's wrestling, but it's like so sinister and evil. It's like, oh my god, only wrestling can something like that work, and it was funny. And it shouldn't be funny. It's horrible what he did, but like it's so cheesy and it's like so out there. It's so preposterous that it can never happen. That it kind of just worked. And then they become aligned. Triple H and Stephanie did. And I got some nostalgia there because they were really good when they first went together in the McMahon Helmsley era. And then she had the women's title run until she lost it to Lita. And then she has the role as a SmackDown general manager. And wow, Stephanie McMahon, I just have to say it, 2002, 2003, Stephanie McMahon. Wow. Oh, man, she was an easy 10 out of 10. Then they mentioned her real marriage to Triple H. They didn't mention Chyna. Had to mention that, though. They didn't say her name. But then the Authority run, as I said, not a fan. The Brie Bella feud happened. That was entertaining for a while. They had the match at SummerSlam with Stephanie won in 2014. It's just like with Brie, I don't think, it's Brie. Okay. Looking back, I don't know how much potential she has to really get over Stephanie, so I understand why I didn't have Brie win. But it's like, it kind of annoyed me that like they didn't have Stephanie McMahon really someone, like there was no Steve Austin to her Vince McMahon, if you know what I mean. I guess they kind of tried it with Ronda, but people turn on Ronda, so it is what it is. They mentioned the McMahon family dynamic, her heat with Shane, and it's ironic because when the Hall of Fame this year, she did her speech. She mentioned Shane, but he wasn't there. He didn't go to his own sister's speech, so there's always been heat there with her and Shane, and who took over the company. But he was not. I believe he was interviewed for this, but. It's obvious that there's always been tensions with the McMahons, and that was later talked about more with the Mr. McMahon documentary, more so Vince's relationship with Shane. But that was interesting. Look, I think overall her character, I liked it a lot in the 2000s. I thought she did a great job when she first came in the Odyssey era with the McMahon Helmsley era, and her as SmackDown general manager. Not just because how she looked, which was great, but like I thought she did a good job, and I liked Stephanie McMahon early on, and then. She came back. It was okay for a while. Then when they did the Authority, I guess the Brie feud, there was her being the heel with Daniel Bryan. A lot of stuff she did was good, but then like the Authority stuff and their reign and her just demasculating all the male performers, it was terrible. And she was the most protected She was the most protected name in the entire company because she's Stephanie McMahon, and like no one can get anyone over her. And there was that infamous Dusty Rhodes thing where. He got one over her, and they got really pissed off at him, and I was never a fan of that, Stephanie. But this was okay, this episode. Then we go to episode 7 on Ric Flair, and he talked about his upbringing. He mentioned stories he shouldn't have. I don't think that's a good idea of him getting arrested with his friends for like going to some slumber party with teenage girls when he was in high school. Vern Gagne was the one who broke him in the AWA. And yeah, early Ric Flair is much different from what Ric Flair would be because you look at his physique, and that does not look like the Nature Boy. He was obviously heavily inspired by Nature Boy Buddy Rogers. They talked about the infamous plane crash in 1975 when he almost died. And really, they just show his career highlights, which is fun looking back because it's Ric Flair's career. They talk about the Dusty feud, which was great. There was that great heat angle in the cage when Dusty saves Flair from Nikita Koloff. But then Rick and Horseman turn on Dusty and they break his leg. And it's just this really violent segment. And looking back, I'm thinking, oh, wow, if I would watch wrestling there, I would have hated Flair. And I know they didn't show the other one where like they broke his arm and like when they jumped him. I think when he was in his pickup truck. I remember hearing about that one, but they didn't mention that. But like Dusty was the ultimate babyface and Ric Flair was the ultimate heel. It's, the blue collar versus the white collar. It's the working class, middle class man, Dusty Rhodes versus the rich and arrogance, Ric Flair, and Dusty looks like the working class, the working man. Flair is this flamboyance, millionaire, and like all these, expensive three-piece suits. So it really worked well. And then they talk about creating the Four Horsemen, Ric Flair, J.J. Dillon as the manager, Ric Flair as the leader, along with Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard, and the man Ric Flair, I think, has still a lot of heat with up until this man's death. Ole Anderson, who, by the way, didn't go into the Hall of Fame when the Horsemen were inducted in 2012. He really hated Vince McMahon, if you know anything about Ole, but and they briefly mentioned Ole here. Then the Ricky Steamboat rivalry, some of the greatest series of professional wrestling matches of all time. Flair, again, great heel. Steamboat, the ultimate babyface, good guy, worked great together. They showed Killer Mike. I don't know who he is. I think I've heard his name. I don't know much about him. He's a huge fan, though. I'll say that. He really loves Ric Flair. You can tell he is a big fan, and he was the kind of guy who they just bring in, just to say stuff, like Jimmy Smith, who's not a fan, but he was a big Ric Flair fan, so you got to give him that. But I'm not too familiar with him. But I mentioned him because he was prominently featured on this episode. Then they talk about the WWF run in '92. They didn't mention the Savage stuff with Miss Elizabeth, with the photos. Probably wouldn't go over well talking about that now, but that was a great feud, him and Savage. And unfortunately, they never had the match with Hogan at WrestleMania when they should have. That would have been WrestleMania 8. But then they talked about how Flair really lived the gimmick. He's a nature boy. And they talked more about that in that ESPN documentary, which is great, the 30 for 30, where he's no longer Richard Flair. He's like more like Ric Flair. And that was great. And by the way, I haven't seen the Wu one on the Peacock original one, Wu becoming Ric Flair. I'm sure that will go more in depth on that. But, he talked about having to pay alimony to 3 women because of all the divorces. I think he's had like 5 divorces now. They show, him returning to WCW, but it's not the same. They shaved his head. That was horrible. I had Russo shaving his head. That's definitely the low point of his career. Then he returns to WWE in the 2000s after WCW goes under. He's part of Evolution. He retires at WrestleMania 24. No, he didn't, but he was supposed to, but he came back for TNA because he needed money. Then had that Raw farewell night after WrestleMania that year. That was a great moment. All those wrestlers paying their tributes as he retired, or so they thought. Then they mentioned Charlotte Flair, his daughter. He's really proud of her. He says, though, she's I've heard him say, not on this documentary, I've heard him say, like, she's the best in-ring performer and, like, the greatest performer they've had ever. She really is he's a proud father. That's great. But again, nothing you haven't ever heard. He didn't talk about suing his son, like he tweeted about last week or so, or a couple weeks ago now. He didn't mention that. I'm kidding, but it's Flair. Look, it's a puff piece. Like the stuff with Flair, there's like a million shit. It's all the controversies. They didn't even scratch the surface here, but I'm sure there's other documentaries you can watch on him that will. But this was more about his career, to be honest, too. And I thought it was fun. It was okay because I liked looking back at his career and some of those great angles, especially with Dusty and with Steamboat and Nikita and all those great memories. So then we go to episode 8. That was on Roman Reigns. Yeah, what do I say? The big dog, Roman Reigns, sucked. That was a horrible character. They mentioned him getting booed as a babyface first. Then they talk about how he grew up with the Usos. They talked about his football career. He was diagnosed with leukemia. That ended his football career when he went to Georgia Tech. He was recruited. Then he was signed with the Minnesota Vikings. And I know Roman, by the way, is a huge 49ers fan, but he was actually signed by the Vikings. And then that's when he did his blood work. And he was in training camp for blood work. The blood work results come back, and that's when it reveals he had leukemia. Then he would recover after a year and a half. His brothers were in WWE already. Not his brothers, his cousins, the Usos, were in WWE already. They wanted him to go. He went there. He's there for a while in Tampa. Then the Shield debuts in 2012. They're over. Then they show the infamous split when Seth Rollins hits Roman Reigns in the back with a chair. And there was a fan screaming, "No!" right when Seth did. I was screaming no because I was a huge Shield fan. I didn't want to see him split. And right when I saw Seth Rollins with the chair and Roman Reigns and Dean Ambrose were like ahead of him and he was behind Roman, I thought, oh no. And he did. He turned. And I was just like that fan screaming, no, no. Anyway, the fans reject Roman Reigns as a babyface. I don't want to talk about this anymore. This stuff's so terrible. I'm glad he talked about it, though, because I thought, by the way, this Roman Reigns one's probably the best one. He talked a lot about the issues with him as a face. I'm glad he went into it. Fuck Vince McMahon for this. Seriously, fuck off. He pushed him as a face for all these fucking years. The fans rejected him. He tried to make him the new John Cena because John was going to leave and John was getting older, so they wanted a new Cena. Roman had a great look. He thought, oh, they boo John. They'll just cheer. We'll stick with Roman. Stick with it. And, yeah, just because it worked for John doesn't mean it was going to work for Roman. And, yeah, this was a flop, man. They really hated Roman Reigns. I forgot, because, again, it's almost like looking back, that version of Roman Reigns, I hated that Roman Reigns character. That big dog sucked. And it's funny in a way because all the WWE shows who would defend him and defend that Roman Reigns and how all the fans are just smarks, they hate him. And I don't like smarks either, but it's ironic because they were proven so much wrong because right when they turned Roman, the business just shot up and it led to like the third boom period in company history after the Rock and Wrestling in the 80s and the Attitude Era in the 90s, late 90s now. And then the Bloodline era. I mean, that's what you can call it. That's what led to the boom, the Bloodline boom. Yeah, turning him heel was a great move. So those shut up WWE shows. There's still people like Ed Koskey and fucking idiots like defending this shit. Anyway, they showed the night after WrestleMania 33 after he beat The Undertaker. What a disaster. Oh, man. I'm glad they're getting into it. I'm glad they're showing this bullshit. Thank God Vince McMahon's gone. Don't you ever come back. I'm like Roman Reigns when he beat Brock Lesnar in that last man standing match at SummerSlam in 2022. He was telling Brock, don't you ever come back. Don't you ever come back. Vince, don't you ever come back. This is what you did. You fucking pushed him as a babyface for 5 years and the fans didn't want it. They mentioned the leukemia diagnosis, which happened late in 2018. He had to relinquish the belt. And then he's back. Fans are cheering him again, it seems. Then they mentioned WrestleMania 35, and to be honest, I don't remember him getting booed that badly at that show for some reason. Maybe because the show was so long, I was tired. But I remember that match with Drew. I don't remember Roman getting booed badly. I don't remember the reaction being that negative. And then he takes a leave after COVID happens in 2020. He returns at SummerSlam that year, attacks Bray Wyatt and Braun Strowman. Then they finally turn him heel. He aligns with Paul Heyman, and he becomes the WWE Universal Champion. And they talk about the feud with Jey Uso and leads to Jey becoming the right-hand man. And I had to mention this. Jimmy Smith was all over this WWE Evil documentary series, despite the fact that he's not a WWE fan. It shows because after his comments, it shows that nothing he's saying is genuine. And he never liked wrestling. He even called it fake or something after he left. So fuck Jimmy Smith, by the way. Then going back to Roman, after Jey and Jimmy are aligned with him, that's when the Bloodline is formed. And he becomes the head of the table, then the tribal chief. He gets the Ula Fala from his father, Sika, and his uncle, Alpha. After he beat Jey in the I Quit Hell in a Cell match. Great moment there. And then they highlight the match against John Cena at SummerSlam in 2021. And then they specifically teased The Rock versus Roman Reigns. It might happen next year. You never know, but I doubt it. I'm not sure we're ever going to get that match. But they did tease it. They teased Rock and Roman, which was funny because this was made in 2022. So maybe they thought they'd get Rock for WrestleMania 39. He's talked about that before, Rock, in interviews, but that didn't happen. Anyway, this was a great episode. I thought this was probably the best one. I really liked the Randy one a lot. I think the Roman one was probably the best because they got into all the bullshit with him as a face, his reaction to it. And I thought that was really entertaining, to be honest. And he was definitely the biggest heel when he was a babyface, when he was the top face. But this was a WWE Evil. I liked the Roman Reigns one a lot. I liked the Randy Orton one. The Hogan one and the Flair one were just kind of things we've seen a million times. They were just kind of there to me. The other ones, looking back, the Miz one I didn't like. Just boring. Nothing there.